Today, I want to talk about muscle cars and Tesla. In today's video, I want to talk about muscle cars and how that relates to Tesla. I grew up in the 70s around muscle cars, and it was a great time period for those cars in the 60s and 70s, and I loved the muscle car era. I loved the way those cars looked. I loved, at the time, I loved the way they sound and smelled, and not so much anymore, but it was a great time period, and I grew up around them and working on them and just being around them. And it seems, as I look around the internet, that there's a lot of guys, and maybe girls too, there's a lot of people that still love muscle cars and still have muscle cars, but they also own EVs. And I want to talk about my journey a little bit with muscle cars and with just big engines and loud engines in general. And this is coming from a guy who just as recently as about 2005 or so, 2006, owned a Hummer SUT, which is the truck version of the Hummer. And it was lifted. I don't remember what size lift was on it, but it was a beast. It had 35-inch tires on it. It was a monster. It got about 8 miles to the gallon, and it was very expensive to operate. But I loved that vehicle when I got it. And the funny thing is when I got that Hummer, I got a custom license plate. And my custom license plate said hybrid. I can't name the number of times that people came up to me asking me if my Hummer was a hybrid. And I looked at them with like that kind of face. And I said, no, I just think it's funny. So to me, back then, I thought Prius were funny. I thought hybrids were funny. I was very ignorant when it came to the world of EVs and hybrids and all that because I didn't grow up around it. I grew up around muscle cars and Harleys and loud engines. And because of Tesla, it seems there's a change going on. I see a lot of guys, former muscle car guys, that are switching to Tesla, and they're switching their cars. They're getting rid of their muscle cars or whatever, and they're just buying a Tesla for an everyday driver. And that's exactly what I did. And I want to talk about that journey and talk about how I got to this point. So up until a few years ago, I owned a 70 Chevelle, a 1970 Chevelle SS, and it was beautiful. It was a red and black. It's my favorite color combination, and I loved having it. I loved driving it around. I loved taking it to car shows, talking to people about it, much like I like talking about Tesla now. But I loved talking about the car, and just, it was a beautiful car. But then about a year and a half ago or so, I met with a friend who was talking to me about solar. We were talking about putting solar on our new house that we were building. And we started talking back and forth on it, and he's an engineer. He knows a lot about solar. He knows a lot about just finance stuff, ways to save money. And he threw out the idea because at the time I was driving, my wife and I were driving Jeeps. Mine was lifted, of course, with 35-inch tires, lifted, beautiful red and black Jeep. We started talking about EVs, and he just brought up, hey, have you ever thought about driving an EV? And I thought, no, I've never thought about driving an EV. And he started talking about the finances and how you can save money. And so he grabbed a napkin, he started doing some napkin math, and he showed me that for me to drive from my house to the office, it was costing me about $16 to drive there. I couldn't believe that I was spending that much money every day, or every day that I drove to the office. I drove a lot more than that. And then he showed me, talked about an EV, and he talked about when he when we do solar on my house, how much money we could save in driving that EV. And basically my solar was costing me 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And again, we started figuring out the math, and it cost me like $1.50. It blew my mind when I realized how much money I could save just by driving an EV versus driving a gas car. This is before even talking about performance or anything else. And this was before even talking about Tesla. He brought up a Fiat 500e. He said, if you go out, man, they've got these Fiat 500es, they're like 80 bucks a month. They're cheap, and you could drive that to the office. And even if you just used it for your around town car instead of you guys driving the Jeeps, here's how much money you would save. And again, I was blown away. I never thought about it. So literally the next day, I went to the Fiat dealership and we had a Fiat 500e. After that, I looked into and I won't bore you guys with my whole EV journey, but it went from a Fiat 500e to then I realized, wow, that doesn't have enough range. So maybe I could look into getting something with more range. Well, at the time, the Tesla Model 3 wasn't even available, and so that wasn't even an option. So I looked into it and I found a Chevy Bolt. So we got the Bolt. So it wasn't even until after the Bolt till we thought to look at Tesla or another EV for the future. The funny thing is, about 3 years ago, we were driving an RV, driving down to, I believe we were going to Disneyland, and we were driving through LA. And my wife saw this beautiful red car drive up next to us. And I looked down from the RV and saw this huge screen, and I'm like, what is that? And then we looked, we realized, oh, it's a Tesla, that's killer, you know, da-da-da-da. And then I saw that it was a P90D. My wife looks it up, and she's like, wow, that's a beautiful car. We loved the look of the car right away. We loved it. We thought that was the coolest car. And then we saw the price tag. And quickly we decided we have to go, you know, it was out of our price range. So we weren't even going to buy it because it was an EV. We didn't even know anything about EVs at that time, but we thought it was a beautiful car. I tell you guys all this because I want you guys to understand where I'm coming from. I am a former muscle car guy. I used to love muscle cars and working on muscle cars and building engines and breaking engines down, or breaking Harley engines down and boring them and changing the pistons and changing the cams and all that kind of stuff. I used to love doing that. And I think it's interesting what's going on in our world right now with the transition to EVs. And I think Tesla is a huge part of that. It's a huge part of the reason that I am driving an EV today. So because of my own transition from gas-powered vehicles over to EVs, I was curious about other people's journeys and other people's experiences. So I put it out on Twitter, and I wanted to see what other people thought and what other people have gone through and how they've transitioned from gas over to EVs. So here you can see I put it out on Twitter. I wanted to see what people had to say and to hear other people's stories on their transition from gas to EVs, or maybe they still own a muscle car but they're also driving an EV. I wanted to see what people had to say. You can see my post here, and as I scroll down, there's different people. Some people, like this person here, says I still own a 2002 Pontiac Firebird WS6, and they also own an EV. So they probably use the EV for their daily driver, but they still own a different gas car. Here you can see this is someone that was talking about their Viper. They sold their 2006 Viper SRT10, and they replaced it with a Model S. I thought that was super interesting. And I knew I wasn't the only one that had gone through this, because you see way too many EVs now, especially Teslas, that I knew that other people had gone through this, and that's why I wanted to make this post. So here you say there's somebody that says I have both. Kind of made a joke that was bummed to find the Tesla's way faster than the 76 Firebird. And that's exactly my experience too. My 70 Chevelle, my rear-wheel drive Model 3 would absolutely, would probably smoke my 70 Chevelle. And I thought my 70 Chevelle was fast. but I just, I'm having interaction and talking back and forth with different people here. This guy said they used to own multiple Corvettes. He was a die-hard Corvette guy, and I can kind of feel that same way. I was a die-hard Chevelle guy, and he posted some pictures of his Corvettes that now all he I forgot to mention that now all he speaks is Tesla. And I think it's so cool to see other people that have gone through this, that this transition that's going on in our world from people owning these gas-powered, monsters to switching over to Teslas. And I think you can directly give credit to Tesla. I think if Tesla wasn't around, this would not be happening, because these guys like this, they would not be switching to a Prius. They would not be switching to another Chevy Bolt or a Ford Focus. I think it's super important to know what Tesla has done in the market. They are completely disrupting the market. Somebody's talking about he owns this guy has a boss that owns a muscle car collection, and he's building his own EVs from scratch. That is so cool. I could never do that. I would probably kill myself trying to build an EV. So I have a lot of respect for guys like Rich Rebuilds and people like that, because as much as I loved working on gas cars, I would electrocute myself probably with an EV. So here's a guy that says he had a Hellcat, and he sold it 2 months prior to getting his Model 3. Again, I knew that I wasn't the only one. I knew there were other guys out there that are selling their muscle cars or these gas cars, switching over to Model 3s or Model X's. And he talks about here where he drove a Model S P90D years ago, and he made Tesla buying or getting a Tesla a priority at that point. That's the way it goes, man. Once you drive a Tesla and you get in it, it's game over. You end up wanting one. This guy talks about a 72 Cougar that had a 351 Cleveland in it. And again, he talks about how his Model 3 would smoke it. So anyways, there's just numerous posts here, and you can find my post on Twitter under my name and go through all these posts of this transition that's going on in the EV market. So as I'm in the middle of filming this, I get a message through Facebook on Facebook Messenger, and this guy reached out and said that he has a neighbor that grew up around muscle cars and loved muscle cars and just loves everything about muscle cars. And he drove a Model S P85, which is a performance Model S. And he takes it to Cars and Coffee and talks about the cars and loves Tesla. And one thing that he said that I think that was important, and it's exactly what I do whenever I talk about Tesla and I talk about my cars, is he doesn't talk about climate change. He doesn't talk about transitioning the world to sustainable energy. What he talks about is how fun the cars are to drive. He talks about how good looking the cars are and how fun they are to drive. And I think most people think that Teslas are very good looking cars, but once they experience driving in a Tesla, most of the time it's game over. They don't understand what the performance is like in these cars. Most people still, as of January 2019, most people don't understand what it's like to drive in a Tesla. They don't understand the performance. They don't understand how quiet and how smooth and how relaxing it is to drive in these cars. So when I talk to people about Tesla and I talk about these cars, I don't talk about climate change. I don't talk about transitioning to sustainable energy. I talk about the performance. I talk about how fun they are to drive. And when they experience it, most people will end up wanting a Tesla. I want to know what you guys think. Have you guys seen a lot of muscle car guys switching over to EVs? Comment below. You may be one. And I would love to hear from you and talk to you in the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you or anyone you know is looking to buy a Tesla, please give them my referral code. If they use my referral code, they can get 6 months of free supercharging. And if they've never driven a Tesla, they can get 9 months of free supercharging. My referral code is MARC, M-A-R-C, 57969. Again, it's MARC, M-A-R-C, 57969. And I'll put a link to the referral code down in the description of the video. Also, please like and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time. Seriously. Gas-powered car for you.